And we're pretty much live.
Hello and welcome to With Thunderous Applause, a podcast where two friends get together, talk about current events and the ideas that will shape our future. I'm your host, Steve.
And I'm Zach.
And today we are continuing our discussion about Taiwan. Continuing with the video of Brian Becker from Breakthrough News talking to Dr. Hammond from New Mexico State University, an expert on the Asia Pacific. And we did our check-in while we were doing tech setup, so we can just get right into the clip if you'd like. Where we left off, I think we basically summarized the situation in Taiwan much like we would any other U.S. imperial affair, and that is U.S. puts puppet government in, stirs up all sorts of shit, and then lays a ton of propaganda on us to try and convince us that, you know, the side they want to win, the side that will uphold capital, is the good guys, and everybody that has a problem with that is the bad guy.
Economic hitman. Oh, yeah.
That's U.S. foreign policy in a very short summary.
Yeah.
It's like, we'll do the bidding of Western capital. You are good.
Yeah.
Oh,
otherwise,
yeah. This is
otherwise, hellfire missile.
Yeah. Otherwise, drone.
Half your family dead. Boom. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, kind of an aside, but something interesting I heard in a different interview I was watching earlier this week, and they mentioned something about Saudi Arabia and how, like, the U.S. kind of was like trying to help MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the new king of Saudi Arabia or whatever, or the heir apparent. I think his fucking dad's still alive, but he's like not functional.
On the way out. Yep.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if he died. I don't follow their politics too closely, but basically they were saying how, like, a lot of the, like, oh, he's a reformer and all this stuff they're talking about, even though, like, and he might be in some respects. I think he is, especially when it comes to, like, attracting, like, tech money and modern kind of things to Saudi Arabia. But how, like, the U.S., like, inside foreign policy circles, they tried to tell Saudi Arabia, like, you have to cut back on some of this really fucking stupid shit you do, like not letting women drive and, like, cutting people's hands off for stealing, like, because we need you and you need us. And, like, it's really making it politically difficult to fucking funnel you massive amounts of weapons when you're, like, pretty much medieval, like, you know. So I just thought it was interesting, and how with the Khashoggi or whatever, the Washington Post ghostwriter or journalist, that they carved up with a fucking bone saw.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like, and how,
and then we forgave.
Oh yeah, because that was basically Saudi Arabia being like, no. Essentially, you need us more than we need you at this point, and it's true. Because when you control the master fucking resource of the global economy, and that's, you know, why we're fucking pissed at, you know, starting proxy wars against Russia and the Ukraine and stuff like that. It's like, they control the resources, they control the power, right? Ultimately.
Unless we're willing to go in and take it forcibly, it's much cheaper to just let them chop up a few, poor
villagers
people,
or whatever.
Yeah, well, villagers and news people and whatnot.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I was thinking of in Ukraine, it's easier just to have a proxy war, right? And, like, give them weapons to fight you, and you fight them, and you kill them, and they kill you, and we're not involved. And it's similar in Taiwan, right? Like, I think in the last clip they showed, like, a little video clip when they were talking about it, of someone basically being like, "You're a nasty woman."
Yeah.
Nancy
Troublemaker
Pelosi, it is just so
troublemaker
fucking
go home. Yeah, troublemaker. Go home.
That's right. Yeah. Called her a troublemaker. Just goddamn the politest way to say fuck off. It's almost disarming. It's so polite, right? Like,
maybe we should say home.
Right, but at any rate, that's exactly what this shit is. Like, fucking Taiwan is. I don't know a ton about it. We're gonna listen to the video clip, but it's essentially just U.S. Covert kind of CIA color revolution bullshit, trying to, like, stir up part of the population to create, propaganda opportunities. When you see people being like, "Oh, fuck off, China," and then all the media is like, "Oh, look at these people, they hate China."
Yeah.
When most of the people in Taiwan is fortunately shitlib supreme John Oliver even did an episode on it where he's like, hey, people in Taiwan just want things to be the same.
Yeah.
They're okay with the status quo, so maybe we could just let the status quo be. But anyway, let's listen to Doc Hammond and Brian Becker talk about Taiwan, and then we'll pontificate over people doing real work.
Let's do.
All right.
Hold on to a past that is fading away behind them, and they're willing to endanger people all over the world, and really, in fact, endanger the American people themselves in order to protect their own power and privileges.
One of the big priorities for the U.S. government since Obama announced the pivot to Asia in 2011 has been to consolidate the other non-Chinese Asian countries into an American network that would be both an economic, political, diplomatic, and military sort of cordon around China, this containment of China. And by containment, we mean to put China in a container, put it in a container such that it can't really move. I mean, it's not containing China, Chinese expansionism, because there's no visible Chinese expansionism outside of, integrated trade agreements like the Belt and Road Initiative or other network-based economic arrangements. But there's no, China's not building military bases around.
Yeah, so he's about to say China's not building military bases around the world. It's true. I wish that I had gotten you the clip and we could have kind of like found a way to bring it in. The Revolutionary Blackout Network, Nick and CJ show. Those guys are fucking whip smart, and I enjoy. They're like one of the only politics show that I still enjoy watching on YouTube. They're fucking awesome. Breakthrough's okay, but I really like watching their commentary. But they were talking about how like the media propagandized China for giving loans because China made a bunch of like infrastructure investments in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was like, okay, well, we can restructure these and make it easier because like, COVID and all those other things, right? These small, weak governments without a huge tax base just weren't able to pay the loans, which interestingly to know, China gave them interest-free loans.
Right, which is not what we would do. And we would demand it be paid in peanuts.
Precisely, as we've discussed before, right? Yeah. And literally peanuts, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of a economic colonialism where you're like, no, we're going to loan you this money, but you pay us back in the commodity that we want, right? And so anyway, China's given interest-free loans in Africa and then straight up tried to restructure and it still wasn't working. They just said, okay, that gone. You don't owe us. And then the Western media is like, oh my God, they're manipulating these countries and bringing them into their fold. And it's like, yeah, they're literally saying, we want to trade with you, but you need a good port for our boats. So we'll just build you a fucking port. And if you can't pay us back because, the global economy took a shit or whatever, COVID, whatever, like, it's cool. We'll still trade and we have the port, right? Like, and now there's a port there and, or whatever. And like, it's part of diplomacy to strengthen relations with other countries.
I think we've forgotten how to do that though.
We do. We never knew it from the beginning of our country. It was fucking kill the Indians. And then we're like, okay, these are your territories beyond this boundary. And they're like, just kidding. Then we pushed over Appalachia and into the whole Ohio River Valley. We fucking pushed them to the Trail of Tears and cleared them all out of the fucking American South and sent them out to Oklahoma, only to later decide, oh, there's oil under the fucking ground we gave you, so you don't own it.
We need
anymore.
that too, by the way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the West Coast Trail of Tears, Pacific Coast Trail of Tears, with all the tribes being consolidated into like Round Valley and all these other fucking places, reservations. And then when they got to the West Coast, what did they do? They said, oh, they went to the Philippines, and then they fought fucking Spain for Cuba and Latin America. And then we had, the Monroe Doctrine, where we're like, hey, Europe, keep your fucking hands off the entire half of the globe.
Right.
It belongs to us.
You've got your half. We're gonna get
you can fight over your half. But realistic, and then we didn't even do that, right? Like, because we were always involved in all that shit. Anyway, so we've never really had, I don't think, international relations. The closest we probably come is like Ben Franklin banging like French prostitutes and shit, or not even prostitutes, fucking
it's a
French
form of
aristocrats,
diplomacy.
like
Yeah,
during the American Revolution, right? Like, Ben Franklin
he was giving them American babies.
he
The
was munching
trade,
on some fucking some frog muff.
Well,
But Jesus Christ, man!
you marry
like,
people off in order to get the families and whatnot, make it so people have to get along, or they end up killing their own family. He was just doing the same thing, but with sex.
Yeah, but that he was a diplomat, right? And that's probably the last time. And then it wasn't even, right?
Yeah.
Because there were territories. It's like if we beat the English, we'll give the French will get a reward too. Mostly the French were just bitter rather at losing previous wars. And I don't know it perfectly, but that's my understanding. A lot of it was just like it was a proxy conflict for France in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, they had been beaten back by England time and time again.
Yes.
There was the saying, "I will take 10 British soldiers, raised on stout beer, over 100, Frenchmen raised on baguettes."
It's fucking hardcore.
It was just that the British soldiers were stouter and healthier, and so they ended up being much more a force to be reckoned with, and it was recognized. And so the French were just bitter over the fact that they couldn't
superior military training and technology and discipline, and some of that's institutional, some of it's material.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and a lot of at the time too, a lot of poor peasants in France, this pre-French Revolution, right? And Britain was beginning the very, very early stages of industrialization. Yeah, so. And they had colonies, a lot of colonies. France had colonies too, but I'm not really quite sure the economics of it. But I think their colonies were more expensive and less profitable, like
French Polynesia and things like that. Yeah,
yeah. But expensive to maintain those colonies.
Like honestly, the Dutch were beating them. That says something.
The Dutch are still beating everybody. That's why we put the UN headquarters there.
We're thinking about moving to the Netherlands.
You are,
because a fair amount of people. We were talking about either Scotland or the Netherlands, because you got a fairly large English-speaking population in both of those areas, and so it's like, well, Scotland is in the UK, no longer in the European Union.
Yeah,
maybe that's maybe it's not worth it.
And they won't vote for succession. That'll come up in our conversation about balkanization. It's come up to the Scottish Parliament, I think, a few times, but they just decided they don't want to.
Yeah, I think your average person there does, but they can't get the politicians to go along with it. And
the wealthy and powerful are like,
right.
I don't know about severing. Like, I have all these assets there. I don't want to lose those.
Exactly. Yeah. I would end up severing a lot of very lucrative ties.
Exactly. And then making it more difficult, right? Like, someone might be for a small manufacturer or whatever. Most of my big contracts are down there. And then if we're a separate country, now all of a sudden there's fucking tariffs and shit. Like, and it becomes international trade instead of putting a crate on a fucking lorry and driving it south, right? Like,
we're on the train. Yeah. Exactly. They got a good train system.
They do. Yeah, we'll have to talk about that a little bit offline. I'm kind of fucking fed up with being here. It's forecast to be 110 next week after Labor Day. And Labor Day is usually when it's supposed to cool off, but still not.
We're 110 this Saturday, I think.
Yeah, I think we're forecast around that too. Yeah, I think it's this coming weekend. Is forecast that. Hopefully the forecast changes. I don't really trust them too much 3 days out, but
it's dropped a few degrees. Previously, when they said, 5 days out it'll be this much, it might be like 2 degrees lower. That's about it. But yeah, it's fucking September, y'all.
Pretty much. I mean, a couple days in September. Yeah.
Shouldn't be this fucking hot.
All right. So propaganda, military installations. China does not have imperial ambitions by any measure. That's why I brought up the stuff in Africa.
Well, it's very
not imperial. It's literally costing them to build infrastructure. They're not building military bases.
It's just economic ambition, basically. I mean, what is the saying? Diplomacy is war by other means. Like, that's what they're doing. They're just skipping the expensive part of building a whole lot of weapons and expending them against their enemies. They're just like, why waste that when we can just trade with people? and
Right.
expand
And
that way.
I was going to say, he mentioned, Brian Becker mentioned the Belt and Road Initiative. Interestingly enough, and a nice little behind the scenes for people who don't know, a mentor and friend of mine who's like, gotta be ready to kick the can soon. I saw him like a couple months back, but he's getting pretty frail, and he's kind of also like a weird headspacey guy. And so he's like, if I meditate hard enough, like I'm researching, like you can meditate and you can like literally subsist on air. You don't have to eat. And I'm like,
Oh God.
no, you're
Please
an
eat.
organism that needs to metabolize. You need to fucking eat.
Yeah. Please
Anyway,
eat.
yeah, and he's so frail. But anyway, he is a retired diplomat who had a number of posts. He mostly early career did like passports in India and Pakistan. And then he was a cultural attaché later in his career for Saudi Arabia and Riyadh. And then he finished his career as the special attaché for U.S. foreign policy to CENTCOM, to General Mattis, who was temporarily Trump's Secretary of State, and a pretty well respected, at least in foreign policy and defense circles, a respected military leader. And Lewis, my friend, he worked like in the same fucking building as him. Right. And he was supposed to represent U.S. diplomatic interests, or ensure U.S. diplomatic interests were being observed and or advanced and or at least understood by military command leadership. And CENTCOM is this Central Asian theater, so that included Afghanistan, Pakistan, Middle East. And so he worked directly with this guy, and one of the projects he worked on was trying to link that region, what he called the New Silk Road. Well, he brought that, got a meeting with, at the time, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, brought this forward and said, you know, this is what I and he knew the region well because he spent most of his career there, right? Like, in Pakistan, India, and Saudi Arabia, right? So he knew the region well. He's like, if we can build the infrastructure to connect this region economically, like, it will benefit us, it will benefit American companies, it'll benefit European consumers, it'll benefit the whole fucking world to actually just take this place, which is kind of far out of the way and forgotten, except when an empire needs a place to kill itself, commit suicide, right? Afghanistan is largely known as like the graveyard of empires, dating all the way back to fucking Alexander the Great, bro. Like for fucking millennia, timescales that most people don't think about, right? Like
right.
That is where his campaigns ended. They fucking, and the British shortly, that's where their expansionism stopped, and then they consolidated around British India, right? Like, and held that until well into the 20th century, but like their expansionism stopped. It's the fucking graveyard of empires, dude. Anyway, my point is, he said, let's connect it. And Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said, no, I don't like that idea. And then China, just 3 years later, announced this big project called the Belt and Road Initiative. And so the belt was to wrap Asia, right? And then basically it was the New Silk Road. And so he had this idea and presented it, but fucking warmongering, fucking imperialist, chauvinist pieces of shit like Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, they don't want any of that fucking. No. We don't want to economically develop. We don't want to improve their quality of life. Our job is to extract and to decimate and to destroy those people, not to make their lives better. Even if making their lives better means more security, because fucking the number one recruiting tool for fucking terrorist organizations is poverty. Right. Just like the number one recruiting tool for, violent gangs in the United States is fucking poverty.
Is the U.S. military a violent gang? Oh, wait. Yes, it is. And poverty, it helps them recruit.
And poverty. I was essentially poverty drafted in. When I left, when I got on the fucking plane, bro, I had like 30 fucking bucks in my bank account.
Yeah.
You know, because we were friends at the time, so you
Yeah.
knew how broke I was. I had like 30 fucking bucks.
Yeah.
I'm always like, dude, can I borrow like $20? I need a fucking pack of smokes and a sandwich. Like, you know, like those kinds of things. Or, you know, why is your phone turned off? I was like, because I got like fucking $15 in my pocket.
Can't afford the minutes.
Turn your phone back on.
Can't afford the
And
minutes.
I wasn't proud
That's
of
right,
that.
kids. That's right, kids. Minutes were a thing back in the day.
Yeah, I need more minutes. At any rate, I just wanted to bring up the Belt and Road Initiative as like good foreign policy, and to have that very, very personal connection, very inside look, like as a diplomat. I helped him with his campaign. He ran for Congress as a Green Party in the district here, and of course did awful because the Democrats put up this like adorable, attractive young woman, and it was like the whole like, you know, and the whole thing backlash to Trump, basically, women power kind of stuff. So, but anyway, you know, he enjoyed campaigning, but he did very poorly, like 2% or something. And that's fine, but whatever, because our district is like fucking 70% fash anyway. So, or fash or conservative. So,
yeah, it's a pretty rough area.
Yeah, it is. All right, let's continue. Belt and Road Initiative would be a much better idea than color revolutions and proxy wars in Taiwan.
Indeed.
In the world, it's not expanding its military to other areas. So containing China means to put China in a container. So you had Biden, and we played a little clip from his first trip to Asia, talking about South Korea and Japan and trying to enlist the Philippines, other countries into this network. There was an article in the New York Times. I don't know if you had a chance to see it. It came out on Wednesday. It came out today, the day we're recording this show, where there's an analysis that this trip by Pelosi has actually undermined Biden's aggressive strategy of network building, because what Pelosi did by escalating it so provocatively, by escalating the situation, by creating a confrontation or near confrontation in Asia, she did it without consulting any of the other so-called Asian partners. It shows that South Korea, Japan, the Philippines, Thailand, or any other nation, they're not real partners. They're like junior partners or less than junior partners, because here's Pelosi upping the ante. It could really impact on those countries if there's a military clash in Asia, in the Pacific. They're not talked to at all. It shows that they're really in a neo-colonial status. And obviously, since they don't want to be, and no country wants to be a neo-colony, and no country wants to be a subject to American imperialism and dictated to by American politicians like Nancy Pelosi, they're going to take umbrage at that. They're not going to like that. They're going to resist that. In other words, there's a self-defeating, contradictory character of this arrogant strategy.
Pause.
Oh, I couldn't.
Before Dr. Hammond responds, he might say something similar to me. He's basically saying, did Nancy Pelosi's trip was just all these diplomatic efforts with other Asian countries, and how you just did something that created a lot of tension, real tension, military drills and other kinds of things in a region that we're going to suffer if there's war. You're far removed, we will suffer if there's war because this is our neighborhood, basically.
Right.
And how on one hand you have the Biden administration trying to continue with Obama's pivot to Asia, and this kind of getting the countries who have accepted the hegemony of Western capital, like South Korea and Japan, and granted, accepted the hegemony of Western capital at gunpoint, right? Because remember, we destroyed those countries in not too distant past as well, right? And sorry, I'm speaking too loud?
No.
Oh, okay, I see what's going on. You had some hair on the inside of your muff.
I did. Hair in my muff.
But anyway, so these countries that have accepted Western capital were oh yeah, you're a partner in crafting this regional policy. Why is the U.S. crafting regional policy in fucking Asia when we can't even get our own? We control most of the continent. Our country does. occupies most of a fucking continent, and we can't get our shit together. Where's our fucking high-speed rail? Where's our fucking, functional air, aviation system? The national airspace system's completely fucked right now. And I was watching another video on that. My partner just traveled via plane, and she got fucking delayed. And it's like everybody's experiencing delays, and so the government can't even like maintain transportation and good relations among states or anything here. Yet it's like working with them, being like, here, let us help you craft like good regional policy for our capital.
We know what we're doing. Follow our advice.
Follow our advice.
You kind of look like you're doing pretty shitty over there. Like, right. Yeah, but we know.
But anyway, what Brian Becker was saying is that by virtue of what we discussed last time about how like this is fucking monumental, like it takes 40 or 50 years of stable kind of diplomatic status quo and just fucking shakes it, right, and breaks it, and tries to make something else without a clear fucking plan of what to make, right? So what he's basically saying is like, even relations over the last several decades, we've been trying to strengthen with other markets that are safe for Western capital and try and create a united front of sorts against the hybrid socialist or communist market system that exists in China. Because they certainly have many, many elements of capital. China is not like this fucking utopian communist, utopian communist country or anything by any measure. They have a lot of elements of capitalism and wealth inequality and stuff. But my point is that you're trying to unite these people in a united front against this perceived enemy, ultimately just because China's economy is bigger than ours, and that means our dollar is not going to be valuable. And if our dollar is not the international reserve currency for oil, it's not worth much because our fucking economy sucks. It's based on finance alone. So if you don't have the advantage in financial markets, then we don't really have a functional economy, at least internationally, right? Sure, local economies will still continue to churn because people still need to eat and still need to build a shelter, right? Like,
right.
But internationally speaking. So anyway, I just wanted to point out what he was saying is that like more of that disrespect and that chauvinism that Hillary Clinton showed on the Belt and Road, or the new Silk Road idea that my friend presented to her. It's more of the same of like Nancy Pelosi just being like, oh, I'm going to do this, and like completely oblivious of like, you just fucking pissed off all the people we are trying to be nice. We're trying to get to do our bidding for us. And you just fucking made them mad. And that I go ahead and comment. I had a final thought to that.
No, please go ahead. Oh, okay.
Please.
I was going to say that we've seen what happens domestically anyway when you kind of deprive capital of places to put itself. And that is, it goes into the most integral parts of our society, like housing and stuff like that, and just gets its tendrils in there and fucks the little guy hard.
Gets his tentacle up there.
Gets his tentacle up in there. Yeah, does some hentai shit. But like, it's so easy to understand why other countries might just be like, no, we don't want American capital. We've seen what it can do, especially like China. They're like, why would we want you to come in here, own our shit, and then just basically abuse our people?
Yeah. And extract rents from us, right?
Yeah,
own
exactly.
Our shit and then rent it to us.
Yeah, precisely. Like, no, I don't want that.
Right. And my final point on it was that before we continue the clip is that this is we talk, a big theme of this project, this podcast, is imperial decline and what that means for us in our daily lives, right? In our own individual and social reproduction in our communities, right? And the health and security of our communities. What does that mean in the context of imperial decline and ecosystem collapse and all of these other converging crises, the socio-political, economic, and ecological crises that are all fucking happening at the same time? And this is exactly it. That kind of arrogance, chauvinism, you could just destroy several decades of hard work of diplomats and policy people and everything trying to figure out how to make this work for at least to select the in crowd, right? The Western capital crowd. And then she could just fuck it up in a day with her hubris. And that's a big sign of imperial decline as well, is making your allies no longer trust you to be a leader.
Right.
Especially when you're the imperial power, the hegemon. And if other people are like, nah, fuck, I don't trust you. You're fucking, Trump did a lot of that too. And I'm not saying I'm not one of those, orange man bad people. Like, he's just a symptom of the disease, right? The disease is fucking capitalism, and the disease is industrial civilization. But, he also did a lot to do that by making other countries are like, hey man, we got our own populations, our own fucking problems to deal with. When we come together with you on the international stage, like, we have some things we need to work out with you. But if you do something like Trump did with withdrawing from the fucking Iran nuclear deal, which was a fucking phenomenal treaty, really fucking like kind of on the level of some of our anti-nuclear treaties with Russia and the late Soviet Union, or the Soviet Union later in its period, like some of the START treaties and all that other stuff, test ban treaties and all that stuff, right? Really important piece of diplomacy, a really good treaty, and just fucking shat on it, and no one can trust you. You're like, well, you can say we're doing this agreement and we plan for that, and we make decisions that take years to implement, right? Like, not building a nuclear reactor or not, or doing some other kind of thing might be years and years and years projected out for the project, right? For engineering and design and all that.
It's about 7 years.
Yeah. And so you're
average.
Like, cool. So like, we're making this plan and working towards it. It's going to take many years. And then you just in a fucking afternoon just decide, like, you drank too much Diet Coke and ate too many fucking Whoppers and just decide, no, I don't really like that.
We know he
fucking black man did that. I don't like that.
Yeah.
I want to tear down other people because I'm a shallow fucking sad little man baby.
He doesn't have any good ideas of his own, so it's easier to tear down other people's ideas.
Remember, now he's gonna make NAFTA better. But this is not the Orange Man Bad show.
No, it's not Orange Man Bad. However, you did make me think about it. Well, when you're talking about like how when everything falls and empire declines and all that, like, what is going to be one of the first things to go to the wayside? Well, it's really hard to convince people to like conserve land if they're suffering and starving. You're going to cut down trees, start farming locally because you can't get things imported anymore, and we're just going to end up even worse than we were before. So like, it's bad for us, it's bad for the future, bad for, well, I suppose the planet will come back after we're dead. It probably doesn't mind too much. But
planet's fine. Biodiversity, on the other hand, which is
that's true. Yeah,
probably planet, the rocks, the water, plants, animals. There's got to be something here.
But we'd probably get another explosion like the Cambrian explosion. It would just be the post, human explosion. Yeah. Post-anthropic explosion.
Yeah, exactly. So like, after we're all gone, the aliens come back and be like, "What is this bizarre layer in the strata?"
And you're like, so much microplastic.
Microplastics. And actually, there's we should show that clip at some point. I forget his name. He's Canadian, but he's like Asian. He's a famous like biologist or philosopher, and he has this really great line where he's like, if archaeologists of the future look back at this period of time, if we survive, they're going to assume that like they're basically going to find like plastics and fucking chicken bones, is what he said. Like, our middens is going to, because we eat so like globally,
we have
like,
elevated the chickens. Yeah, like we have elevated chickens to the extent. Like, why are we worshiping cows? We should be worshiping chickens. Get your shit straight, people.
I mean, I raise my own chickens, like 50 to 100 a year. Like, that's my household eats like easily eats a chicken a week, probably a little more, right? Like chicken and a half a week. Yep. So I could totally see, there's a lot of chicken bones. That's just my family. Multiply that by like thousands.
Clearly, they were trying to preserve their gods.
All right, let's play this clip.
I agree more with that too. Even Biden's trip, where he made those statements about military engagement with China, that was a trip that did not yield by any means the kinds of results that he had hoped for and that had been talked about before he embarked on that. I think that recent American diplomatic efforts in the Western Pacific or in Southeast Asia or South Asia have not been going well. Despite the propaganda that gets put out and the various claims that get made, these countries are very uncomfortable. I mean, Japan and South Korea are still, because of course they're occupied militarily by the United States. We have thousands, tens of thousands of troops over there. They're in a situation that's somewhat particular. But other countries across the region are increasingly anxious about the desperation that they see in American activities in their areas. I think a very, very clear indication of all this has to do, or can be seen in the response to the war in Ukraine, where the United States talks about how this has been such a great thing because the Biden administration has reunified all of our allies and the whole world is backing us against this terrible aggression by Russia and all this. When in fact, if you look at a map of the world and you look at the countries that have supported the American sanctions and the American aggression there, as opposed to countries that have not, the vast majority of people in the world are represented in countries that have not joined in that American sanctions regime and supported the American policies. And that includes countries that are routinely talked about by the Biden administration as if they were big supporters, like India. Right? India doesn't sign on to this stuff. Now, India and China have their own issues, and those have their historical roots, much of which are the legacies of imperialism themselves. But the fact is that this is a moment where India and China are finding more in common in the anxiety that both countries feel about American imperialism and about American domination. So, yeah, I think that Pelosi's trip.
I hadn't heard much there about Indian diplomats being concerned about it, but of course, why not, right? Like, it's just kind of interesting kind of realignment. And they mentioned that like, most countries don't want this, right? And unfortunately, like we're like, we have these international law and international political institutions, but like none of them really matter, right?
No, it's international recommendations.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you have like, it's like, a statement condemning, like globally, like a statement condemning Israel's treatment of the Palestinians and a demand that they stop fucking rocketing and fucking drone bombing kids throwing fucking rocks, right?
Please.
And then they get all but like, U.S. is like, I'll be really upset with you, Canada, if you don't vote for this. And then beyond like a couple that like refuse to not take the U.S.'s side and Israel itself, like almost fucking unanimous globally. But it doesn't fucking matter because when it comes down to the Security Council, U.S. can fucking veto that shit. And so when they're like, we need to condemn Israel, even just a statement, a strongly worded letter, the United States is like, no. And why? Because in the United States, there's a very wealthy constituency that matters a lot to, especially like the evangelical Christians. Like, for whatever reason, I think they're like, I'm not sure the exact belief, but I think they're like, Israel has to be completely unified again because that's the prophecy for the end times.
Yep.
Yeah.
In order to bring about the end of times.
Fucking insane.
And remember, the end times is good thing. Orange man bad, end times good. The metric.
But most of the evangelicals were orange man good.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Orange man good.
He was a harbinger of the end times for sure, for some people. It's
Yeah.
like he was the fucking Antichrist. Or whatever. Anyway, how much longer do you want to run on this?
We got 40 minutes so far. We could definitely keep going. And also, I found it interesting that he said, the number of people that are opposed to it. Because you take just India and China, you add them together, you have 25% of the population of the world. So, like, you just got to get a few more people on board.
Yeah, and of course, if a government takes a particular position, not everybody in that
No, of course not.
country has that opinion.
But it doesn't matter because the country swings that way. And on the world stage, we don't care about the individual. We care about what the country is saying and what its
Yeah.
leadership is saying. So,
I would agree with that. Let's just do a little more.
Going to Singapore, going to Malaysia, those are not countries which are gung-ho supporters of the United States in this region. Those are both countries, especially Singapore, that have navigated a very, very careful relationship with China, that appreciate China's return to prominence in world affairs, and I think are anxious about American intentions and about how those are going to affect them. So, yeah, I think that this idea that this is, as Secretary of State Clinton said in a famous article back in 2011, this is not the new American Pacific century. That's what she was calling for. Let's have a new American Pacific century where the United States thinks of itself as the hegemonic power all across the Pacific. But we see that falling apart in places like Singapore, in little countries like the Solomon Islands. The white colonial, post-colonial societies like Australia and New Zealand, sure, they're willing to a certain extent to sign on, especially Australia. But we saw statements recently by Prime Minister Ardern in New Zealand in which she said, let's not get carried away with this. China is a very important country. We may have our disagreements, but we also have a lot of shared interests. That's a much more pragmatic approach. And when you see a country like New Zealand taking that kind of attitude, it suggests just how far American ambitions are overreaching and how the realities of America's international situation are eroding in ways that simply are not being addressed.
Yeah, pause there.
The
Nice little spot to pause. Yeah,
Yeah,
so that's basically what we were saying earlier. It's like there is a rational way to approach this as the
right.
And the Prime Minister of New Zealand, like, I don't know a lot about her, but I know, like, seems like a kind of politician I wish we had here in the fucking United States, right?
Level-headed.
Yeah, except for all the guns bullshit, but fuck that.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, and having like a rational approach and being like, hey, man, you don't have to be besties with them to be like,
Yeah.
hey, it's probably better that we don't start fucking shooting at each other.
Well, yeah.
Right? Go ahead.
I was going to say we're basically about like one good reassurance from China to Japan away from losing, Japan as a partner, like, and losing their consent to having all these military bases. Like if China could, engage in diplomacy with them, and I realize there's a massive history there of antagonistic behavior, but if they could, then Japan could just say like, America, get the hell out of our area. We don't want you anymore, and then that whole area is lost.
Oh yeah.
Turned
Yeah,
off.
and there are being kind of like tangential to the peacenik scene. Like there are lots of efforts to organize, like in Japan, organized around trying to get them to close U.S. military installations.
I
Same
can
in South
understand that.
Korea,
Well, I mean, they've
especially
had
in
it
South
since World War.
Korea. Go ahead.
I was going to say they basically we had the agreements in World War II that we would provide a military defense, and that's what allowed them to become basically like an economic superpower and a technological hub, was just knowing they didn't have to dedicate much, if any, of their resources towards defense. They're just like, okay, cool, let's just reinvest in becoming some of the smartest people in the fucking world, and getting like actual worthwhile shit done. And so like that's the only reason.
I know organizers for peace in South Korea, with the stuff around North Korea and nuclear testing and this, that, and the other thing, fucking terrified. They're like, you fucking piss them off. The prime target number one is not like, they don't have like, intercontinental ballistic missiles. Their long-range missiles can hit us though.
Yeah.
And so they're like, their number one target is going to be the U.S. military installation that's like not very far from their fucking border.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're like, why are you doing this? So we, in that way, also undermine our diplomatic ties with these countries by just being like, no, well, we do what we want, without even fucking thinking that there's tens of millions of men, women, and children in these cities that could be obliterated because you fucking got, your dick spanked by some mean thing that fucking the Kim said or whatever else, right? It's just fucking idiotic. And like, no president has been like Barack Obama does this whole had this whole I am like sophisticated, blah blah blah. He spoke like fucking like an Ivy Leaguer and all that other shit. So and people ate that up. But his goal was the fucking same. Yeah. Like they all have the same goal. Do you want to stop there? We've been going for what, an hour?
45 minutes.
Okay, let's go a little longer.
We're only about 23 minutes of an hour. We may not get
through this clip because like it's just kind of like American foreign policy like 101.
It's dense, yeah.
And it relates to fucking everything about the end of empire and other things we've talked about with Ukraine and et cetera, so forth. So
yeah.
The pivot to Asia announced by Obama in 2011 was considered, well, it was misunderstood at first. A lot of people didn't know what it meant because it's vague. What does it mean to pivot to Asia? But obviously, when one started to read the details of what the pivot to Asia included, it meant that by 2020, 9 years after Obama's announcement, the U.S. was planning to place 60% of its U.S. naval and 60% of its U.S. Air Force assets into the Pacific, meaning around China. So the pivot to Asia it had an economic component and a political component, but it had mainly a military component. And when you think about the U.S. history in the last, say, 125 years, this wasn't the first pivot to Asia. In 1898, the U.S. went to war against Spain to take over Spanish colonies, Puerto Rico and Cuba. That was in 1898, 1899. It then seized part of Colombia, created the Panama Canal. That was all designed to create a Caribbean base that would link American northeastern industrial cities to the Pacific and to China in particular. The European powers had already divided up, sliced up China into different spheres of influence. That's when Hong Kong was stolen by the UK, for instance. But the U.S., even though it was late to the game of dividing up China, it was there by 1898, 1899. John Hayes, the Secretary of State, wrote the Open Door Notes as a policy. It was a pivot to Asia. And the Philippines was invaded, and a million Filipinos died resisting the American takeover of their country.
Yep.
And then the Philippines was made into a colony. And then right after World War II, right after the U.S. dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan, ending at the end of World War II, the U.S. pivoted to Asia by going to war in Korea. And 4 million Koreans died, according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, about 1 out of every 5. Yeah, and the main complaint of American pilots was that there was nothing left to bomb in Korea. And they made that complaint by December 1950 or January 1951, and the U.S. kept bombing for 2 more years. Then the U.S. went to war in Vietnam, another pivot to Asia. I mean, these pivots to Asia are pretty bad for Asians.
Oh, yeah.
And so you had President Obama
pivot
who won the Nobel Peace
pivot
Prize
somewhere else.
Well, he didn't do anything to win that prize. I mean, he got that prize because his name wasn't George W. Bush, I think.
Oh, sure.
He got the I am not George W. Bush Nobel Peace Prize. But then he announces the pivot to Asia in 2011. And here we are again, risking another major war in Asia, and the U.S. announcing major power conflict, meaning conflict with China, as its priority. Whenever the U.S. pivots, it pivots in a military way. And this is so in such contradistinction to what the Chinese keep sort of insisting, and the Americans denounce it just as simply propaganda. They say, why should the Chinese people's rise out of poverty and underdevelopment be considered a negative or deficit for you? Why can't it be win-win? Why can't our peaceful rise out of underdevelopment and poverty be considered a good thing
Zero-sum mentality
rather than an existential threat?
Precisely.
Again, let's help the audience understand what's the logic here for U.S. policymakers. I mean, Philippines, Korea, Vietnam, now this pivot to Asia. What's the logic here, or is there no logic? I think there is a logic, but it's not the logic we prefer.
Well, I think there's a very straightforward logic, and the relationship between the United States and Asia has seen this logic be played out and demonstrated repeatedly. Your narrative, picks up in the 1890s with the American war with Spain and taking the Philippines and Guam and all that. Even that is only a successive stage in a process that goes back much earlier. As early as the 1840s or so, the United States had passed legislation that gave itself the right to go out and take territory on islands across the Pacific that were useful for refueling or restocking American naval ships, that were seen as potential sources of vital chemicals, things like potassium and others.
Yeah, fertilizer, bird shit,
seabird poo.
This was a policy that really went back to the very origins of the Republic. The wealth of Asia, the wealth of China, was a huge attraction. I mean, that goes back, the whole modern history of Western civilization is grounded on this quest for access to and then control of the wealth of Asia. And in the 19th century, the United States becomes a part of that. The U.S. is occupied considerably with its own domestic imperialism, with the conquest of indigenous peoples and the expansion of its territory on the continent. But by the end of the 19th century, those very 1890s that you're talking about, the Pacific becomes the great new frontier. We overthrew the independent monarchy of Hawaii in 1895, annexed it in 1898. We had purchased purchased Alaska from Russia at bargain basement prices back
Russia
in the 1860s. So this thrust into the Pacific, pivot to Asia, if you will, as you say, this has deep, deep historical roots. But there is a common logic to it, which is gaining access to and control of wealth. The pursuit of profits. This is a structural imperative of the capitalist system. The United States is in many ways still remains the premier capitalist society and economy in the world. We are at the heart of a global system of capitalism that isn't just a matter of the American nation, but is an international imperialist system. And what that means is that that capital will go wherever it can to maximize its profits, to maximize its return on investment. And for much of history, that has meant Asia. Asia has been a source of tremendous wealth. And the United States has steadfastly and consistently pursued that. So gaining access, you mentioned Secretary Hayes' open door notes. When I teach about those, I always refer to those as the equal opportunity imperialism notes, because they were designed to prevent other countries from establishing exclusive areas of economic exploitation. We wanted access to every place for economic exploitation. That's why the United States was an opponent of European colonialism under President Roosevelt. Roosevelt understood that European colonies were a barrier to American capital. So he supported independence for Indonesia, for example. He supported, the independence of India. It didn't come in his lifetime, neither of those, but he supported those because he wanted to break down the exclusive policies of European colonial empires so that American capital could go wherever it wanted. And that has remained kind of the litmus test of American foreign policy. It remains that today. Where can American capital go to pursue its
dick wet?
Profitability? If a country is open to American capital, if a country throws itself at the feet of American capital and says, come on in and take what you need, give us the crumbs from your table, that's a great country. It doesn't matter what its political situation is. Look at Saudi Arabia. America makes billions of dollars, and we don't care about the repressiveness of that regime. We don't care about their policies of assassinating their political opponents. We don't care about cutting off the hands of people who do shoplifting. We don't care about that stuff. All we care about is the
I swear to
profitability
Christ,
of
like I did
American
not
investments
watch
and
this to
American
prepare.
economic
Like
trade
I'm just
and
saying
things like
shit that
that.
I know.
But a
right?
country that resists American capital,
Basically,
a country that says
just repeating
we'd
everything you
rather
said.
conduct our own affairs in our own self-interest to develop our own economy and take care of our own people. Again, doesn't matter what the nature of that political system is. They could have a representative democracy. They could have a liberal political society. It doesn't matter. They're going to be demonized. They're going to be targeted, and they're going to be seen as authoritarian autocracies, whatever you want to call them. And we have a whole name list that American politicians love to trot out. But they're going to be seen as enemies. They're going to be seen as unfree societies. What matters about freedom is freedom of capital flow.
That's a
and
great
that is the
place.
underlying principle of American foreign policy. You're either with us or you're against us. When the United States thought that China was going to throw itself at the feet of capital and was going to become a capitalist country and was going to have regime change and color revolution or whatever, then we had this much more constructive relationship. Now that it's very clear that China doesn't intend to do that, China is seeking its own path, trying to build its own socialist future. Now they're the worst enemy possible, because they even though there's certainly plenty of American investment there, they don't just throw their doors wide open and say, "Come take whatever you want." Right? Those are the criteria by which American policy is calibrated, and we can see that in the implacable hostility which has emerged as China's autonomy, China's independence, China's self-determination has become an increasing reality over the last couple of decades.
It's a good spot to stop
Yes,
there.
I'm absolutely on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, he's completely right. China didn't throw its legs open and say, "Take me, America, you big boy." And we were just like, "Well, then you're our enemy. We need to be able to get up in that."
Yeah.
And
yeah, exactly. It's kind of what I was saying earlier. Again, like, I mean, I watched this, but like 3 weeks ago. I don't remember what's in
Right,
it, but like
right.
this is widely understood if you follow like critical left perspectives on foreign policy,
Right.
or just understand the system that we live in. Like, of course, that's what it is. Like
Right.
the Saudi Arabia example was one that I gave earlier, and is largely floated as like, we don't care about freedom and fucking democracy. If like these people are our
Money.
allies, this regime, it's all about fucking money.
Well, it's not freedom for us. It's freedom for the capitalists. It's freedom for the wealthy. And the quickest way to be free in the system that they've set up is to be wealthy as fuck. If you have all the money, no one can stop you. That's
not
freedom.
even accountability. Even the court system is undermining like its own reputation by doing things like refusing to release the names in the fucking books.
Right.
And refusing to hold these uber wealthy accountable for fucking raping kids on fucking Epstein's Island.
Yeah.
Like, and then they're going to fucking give a little slap on the wrist, maybe a little jail time. I don't know what her actual sentence was, but Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yeah.
I don't know what her sentence was, but I don't imagine it was fucking public execution, which is probably what she fucking deserved.
Well, I mean, she might just get private execution,
Yeah, she'll just have an accident, or she'll suicide herself, right? Just like Jeff Epstein did. But anyway, my point is like, there is no accountability for the super rich. And like, that's American foreign policy, they just went through it all the way back to the very fucking foundation of our country, has always been predicated on where can our rich people make more money.
Right.
And it's brainwashed much of the population into believing that system is good. Like, why the bumper sticker on the big pickup truck? Why is our oil underneath their sand? Like, that person thinks they're fucking clever, but how telling is that like, you're literally like saying how fucking entitled you are. While that's the same kind of, the person that puts that bumper sticker on their big pickup truck that's got like the tow hitch fucking nuts that hang down, that shit?
By the way, that is a trans truck. That truck had no sexual identity. They forced truck nuts on that truck. It is now a transsexual male truck.
Stop.
Stop with the trend.
Those are the same people that are like fucking. I don't know, man. There's just so much discontinuity, and like that's what scares me the most. Like I really mostly like all this shit's gonna fall apart, right?
Right.
U.S. economy, dollar's gonna fucking tank. What I need to know is the people that live in and around me in our region are going to care about the productivity of the ecosystem that provides us the things we need to live our lives, like to metabolize, right? And
Yeah.
reproduce ourselves daily, right?
Keep that heart beating.
Yep. And yeah, and replace cells and everything else, right?
Yep.
And be able to raise our and provide and reproduce, have young, right?
Yep.
That's our sole drive, metabolize and fucking reproduce. End of story. That's all an organism does. Some do it really fast, some do it really slow. Some get interrupted and don't make it all the way through the process.
Nope.
It is.
I believe it was Slug from Atmosphere who said, that you just need to watch his pets because it's eat, sleep, fuck.
Yeah, true.
That's really what life is about.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess my point is like I'm concerned about the people in empires collapse, states collapse and balkanize. I'm concerned about the people where I live, and those are those type of people that are like so steeped in this national chauvinism that you like try and have a conversation with a state of Jefferson person, which we've talked about, the kind of fascist or extreme right political bent of the regions that we live in. But like, if you try and have a conversation, you're like, with like the 3% state of Jefferson person, and you're like, oh no, I like liberty too. That's why I want the West Coast of the United States to be its own country, and I want it to be a confederacy, so that each individual political unit in there has more autonomy, instead of having one centralized government that taxes. Why don't we each have a territory that we can tax depending on what we need? So if we want fire protection, we can pay taxes for fire protection in the communities we live in, instead of paying taxes to add 2 more lanes to a fucking bridge we never cross.
Well, it's worse than just that. We pay taxes that then get sent to the red states that we don't care for, who then bitch about us, even though we're paying for all their major projects.
And we send 65 to 70% of our every fucking tax dollar to Asia Pacific to have a military base in South Korea.
Oh yeah, never forget that the majority of your taxes go straight towards the military to protect the wealth of the wealthy.
But this national. I was trying to make an argument with someone not long ago that nationalism is far more damaging ideology than religion ever has been. Ooh. And they were like, no, religion's terrible. And I was like,
talk to me, brother, talk to me.
No, it'll have to be another discussion, because I really should get going. I have a thing at the school in like an hour. Yeah, make a note. No, but I will make that argument, and I will back it up with fucking statistics, because World War II killed 60 million fucking people, and that was not religious based. Now you can say, oh, well, what about these terror groups? Just in pure mathematics,
pure
nationalism
numbers,
has been far more destructive. Because even like World War II by itself killed like more people than lived on the planet during the fucking Crusades.
Right. I mean, it is a matter of scale. Like, if the Crusades happened right now, it would probably kill a lot more people. It was just a matter of fact there were like fewer than 1 billion people on the planet at the time. So it's hard to. You got to work those numbers up, rookie. Like
but even that, like it was mostly, it was. I mean, I'm not saying it wasn't a destructive force, but I'm saying nationalism is because if you have nationalism, then you have nation building as well, right? And so then you have all sorts of tiny genocides that have happened across the world, where a national government says, we speak this now, and you don't speak your old like dialect. Right. You speak like this national dialect, and all those tiny like erasures of people's culture and traditions to create national identities. Like, that is a fucking brutal process.
That's almost worse. That is almost worse, I would argue, than just the killing of people, because the killing of cultures that think differently actually stands to eradicate entirely different ways of thinking
Mhm.
that can lead to a view of the world that is differently, that can lead to revolutionary advances. Like, for example, the Aborigines in Australia, they don't have a concept really of left and right. They have merely west, east, north, south, you know, and you don't talk about your left foot. You talk about, which way that foot is facing. And it's a totally different mindset that allows you to come up with new ideas. And, China and other areas that have a language that is based upon a written language anyway, that is based upon symbols rather than characters, leads to a totally different way of thinking. And so, like, to eradicate these different ways of thinking that lead you to see the world in a different way is just tragic, because what could
Yeah.
they lend that you can't with just 26 letters and a few character or a few or a few characters, like, there's a lot to be gained from having different ways of thinking.
Yeah, I mean, we were joking about the post-Anthropocene explosion, right? Like the Cambrian explosion. Well, what happens? It's the same thing in a kind of psychological or sociocultural sense. Like, you're absolutely right. All these little things that make us think a little differently or approach problem solving differently, and all
Right.
these things. And when you just become homogenous,
Yeah.
like, you lose your resiliency, just like an ecosystem that loses various species in various niches. Like, when you have biodiversity decline, like, at any level, like, it affects the whole fucking system. And
I
so,
mean,
like, we need more ideas, not fewer, right?
yeah.
Like, we need more people engaging in work, not fewer, which is why our fucking political system's a mess, because people don't engage in it, because it's designed to keep us out of it.
Oh yeah.
Like, you're like,
To make people hate it.
here's a fucking policy. I literally wrote a policy brief. Will you read it? No. Nah. We're just going to pay the consultant to give us what the developers want.
Well, I will
Right?
say
And the
that I know.
developers want what makes developers money. So it's the same cookie cutter bullshit, so that we just have fucking endless sprawl that's murdering our fucking watershed.
Right. Well, and
Sorry.
I know more people. No, it's fine. I know more people that are ambivalent about politics than are engaged one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Like, honestly, most of the people that I talk to are just like, "Oh, I'm not really involved in politics all that much." And it's like, I mean, you are, but that's your own failing. But they don't participate at all. And I would say more of the people that I know don't participate at all. It's frustrating, but that's just the way it is. It's meant to deter people from getting engaged. And so,
Yeah.
the famous saying that if voting did anything, it would be illegal. You don't have to worry about that, because most people don't even bother.
That's exactly why.
You don't
And
have
then
to
when
make
you
it
get
illegal,
really
because most
excited
people don't
about
care.
someone, they just do some chicanery and be like, well, it's her turn. It's like, yeah, but we really like this guy and his ideas. And then he's just like, whatever you say, I'm just here for the paycheck. And disappoints everybody and takes a revolutionary moment and fucking directs it to elect a fucking. He's fucking gone. He's
Damn
a
you,
corpse.
Bernie. Yeah.
Fuck you, Bernie, and fuck everybody else. Fuck AOC and all those pieces of shit.
Yeah.
He's a walking corpse that can't. It's just like overseeing the fucking sinking of the Titanic. None of them give a shit. The thing I watched on Airlines the other day, it was on Breaking Points. It was Matt Stoller, he's a journalist, was interviewing a guy. It was interesting too, having like inside knowledge about aviation that I do as a former air traffic controller.
Oh yeah.
Like, the fucking system is a mess, and they're like, well, Pete Buttigieg, does he even have power to do? He's like, and all these states' rights people, right, with the fucking testicle hanging from the back of their truck or whatever.
The testy trucks.
Yeah, those guys. Oh, states' rights. It's like, well, then let's fight for things that matter. Like, there's two things. Like, right now, they have federal preemption, so like states can't sue airlines for making people fucking wait and screwing them over and not giving them compensation. Like, state attorney generals can't hold corporations accountable because the federal government says, no, we have preemption. And so it get thrown out into court, right? And then, okay, so then where is the power centered that can actually address this problem? Oh, in a fucking bureaucracy that's headed by a guy who has absolutely no fucking experience, and the only reason he's there is because he threw the fucking election for the corpse. It was a fucking political appointment, favor appointment.
Yeah.
It wasn't because he had fucking any experience dealing with national transportation issues as the shitty mayor of South Bend that implemented policies that fucking condemned people's houses and expropriated the houses of poor because they weren't fucking cutting their grass, which he did. Like, fuck God. All right, we could rant for forever. Needless to say, it's all about the fucking money. Foreign policy is murder people, so murder people, whoever we need to, so that a few people can make a fuck ton of money, and then we do our little cute little political appointments, and then they oversee the fucking collapse of the empire, and like it's going to get much, much worse, and all those fucking right-wing forces that we're surrounded by are being directed to hate fucking trans people, immigrants, whatever else, because they can't fundamentally see that they're being fucked by the system. And those same state of Jefferson people, my point is that they'll talk about fucking states' rights and all that other shit, but they're like, no, we're not. We don't want to secede from the United States. We just want to be the 51st state. It's
right.
Like, oh, okay. So
that's not going to get you what you want.
No, exactly. Well, they'll think, well, then we'll have 2 more conservative fucking senators.
No, you're fucking Stockholmed in this shit. Like,
they are. Yeah. And they have national pride. They're like, oh, God bless our military going and killing those fucking sand niggers or whatever. And you're just like, what the fuck, man? You can't say you want liberty and freedom and then buy into the national chauvinist fucking narrative that they were just talking about, where it's just like, we don't care. We do whatever we want. If it's good for our fucking capitalists, then it's good for everybody, right? Like, it's just fucking insane, dude. Like, it is. It's insane. And I'm getting upset and it's hot and I have to go to the school and go to the parent teacher conference.
Right on.
I'll bring this fire. I always do. They don't like me at parent teacher conferences.
Oh, really?
Well, I'm an opinionated person and I'm not shy.
I have a problem with the principal at my kid's school because she's just like, oh yeah, well, she's on a college campus because she does the college,
takes a couple classes or whatever.
No, it's all at the college campus.
Oh, really?
But yeah, but she's like, well, it's an open campus and anybody can come here, and so she can't sit out on the grass after school. She has to be inside the building unless someone picks her up because we're responsible for her. And it's like, can I give her a knife and will you leave me alone if I do? Like, how about some fucking bear mace? Like, what defenses do you need to be assured and leave me the hell alone? Because, like, okay, so she starts walking home. The moment she's out of your sight, like, you can't do anything about it. And that was her thing. It's like, well, I can't see her when she's out here and I'm in the classroom. It's like, okay, well, you can't see her when she's walking home. She gets a block away. She's out of your sight. Like, what is your goddamn point? And Rachel was saying that apparently since about 1999, schools can be held responsible for anything that happens between the time that children leave the school to the time that they get home. It's like, holy shit, I'm glad I graduated in 99. Because that means I never had to deal with any of that shit. We went to the park. We went to fucking, hang out at other friends' house. Like, really, really, it is a nanny state in California, guys. Like, you might not realize it, but boy, they're just holding your hand every step of the way.
Yeah, that's kind of egregious. But then at the same time, I just went to go get groceries earlier today, and I didn't take care of it early enough in the morning, so I was out when the high schoolers were on their lunch break, and it was fucking pandemonium. Like, I've never been out during this I've driven past, I think, when they're like walking around and stuff, or when school gets out. I've never actually been over there during their lunch break.
Oh yeah,
at that shopping center across the street from school.
Oh yeah,
fucking insane.
I went over to get a burger a couple of times when school was on lunch.
Oh, at Big Chico?
Fucking crazy, man.
Yeah, I ate there a few times with you. We were going like every couple weeks or whatever, meeting for lunch before you had to bike to work. Yeah. And but the whole Safeway shopping center.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Is just like I went into Safeway itself to get some like milk and English muffins or whatever, and yeah, dude, there was like there were like 30 kids. It was super loud. They were all crowded around there. And then there were some around the deli counter, but all of them were most of them were at Starbucks for some reason. A little kiosk inside the Safeway.
Yeah. I found out that you can make your own English muffins. Did you know that?
Yes.
You can just make shit.
Yeah. It's just
Ketchup.
a lot more work. It's just
You can make ketchup.
easier.
It doesn't
We've
just
made
come in a bottle.
ketchup.
Yeah. Fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have
Also
lots
make
of
hot dog
tomatoes, make
buns.
some ketchup.
Ooh. Also make hot dog buns. Pretty fun.
Cool. All right, man. Well, we'll do it again. We'll try and get through the rest of this, or maybe I'll just kind of skim through the rest and see if there's anything
I would say
valuable.
skim through it. A lot of it is repetition from this
Okay.
point on. Yeah,
Cool. And then we can talk about something completely different because, like, the news is moving very fast. I heard, but I don't know much about it, that there's potentially a underwhelming student debt relief thing coming.
Oh no, as far as I know, it's not just potential; it's already in. It's basically $10,000 unless you got a Pell Grant, in which case I think it moves up to 15 or 20,000. But either way, it covers about 20% of what most people have,
Right. It's
and
underwhelming.
it doesn't. Yeah, and it doesn't stop the interest rates either. So you keep building interest even while payments are suspended and a little bit is relieved. So basically, they just want to make sure they don't cut the banks out of their profits, that they're guaranteed. And
So yeah, I guess we'll have to look. I'll have to look into that, and maybe we could talk a little bit about that. Talk a
Yeah.
little bit about student debt. A friend of mine, it was actually paid to organize like student debt cancellation, like lobbying.
Nice.
And of course, it's not enough, right?
No,
And
it's
like,
never enough. It should be free, and all that should be gone.
right, and it doesn't address the fundamental problem. And actually, that would be a good topic because Revolutionary Blackout Network were just talking about it and had some pretty awesome rants that I really identify. Those guys are pretty young too. I think a couple of them are probably closer to our age, but I think a couple of them are like pretty young, like early to mid 20s, and they're just so well read.
Well, yeah, the thing, for
Go
me,
ahead.
it's all about like, okay, you have a country. Now what? Oh, you want kids to keep that country going. Okay, cool. You educate them K through 12. Okay, K through 12 isn't enough anymore. Maybe we need to go K through 16. I think that's how it goes anyway. But let's make sure that 13 through 16 absolutely generates massive profits for banks and does almost nothing for the students. It's ludicrous. We need to just basically do K through 16 mandatory education. Bam. Anyway.
Yeah.
but,
Yeah. And then they do it in other countries.
Yeah.
Like you get. I mean, I think some countries, I need to look into it, but I think some countries in Northern Europe and possibly Scandinavia, they pay you.
Well, not only that,
but you're a student. You need to focus on your studies. Here's a little money for fucking coffee and rent.
And they tend to split it off too, because there's people that will go to university and will continue their general education and then finally focus into a major. And then there's people that go into trade schools. Both of them are paid for. And basically, like, you're made sure that you're taken care of while you get this, because it turns out you need educated workers to make a country work.
Right. And you need those. And that's, I think, the point that they made in their thing, and we'll have a little clip about it, was it's like, you're taking the educated that are moving into like decent jobs or whatever, presumably, like a lot of them just got stuck, right? And like me, I'm fucking highly educated, but like all the skill I have is like not related to my education or whatever.
It turns out if you know how to operate a nuclear reactor and there's no nuclear reactors nearby, your skills are kind of worthless.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, they're just like, why would you like it? We'll have to listen to the rant because it's basically like all these people that are like, oh, market fundamentalists, capitalists, blah, 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 don't even understand how fucking markets work. Because when you take and you burden like the people who are like starting families, want to buy houses and have kids and need to buy a car, and they have no fucking extra disposable income because they're paying fucking interest on their fucking school loan.
Yeah. These are the people that make them.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, they're the ones that make the economy run and keep that fucking ball rolling.
Yeah, my 86-year-old grandma, she ain't spending fucking into the economy. She's not producing GDP. She's not producing taxes.
Yeah, you know me.
But these young people would. And fuck, man, like in a state like California that has like a property tax cap and assessment, local governments, if fucking younger people could move in and fucking buy houses.
Yeah.
Because all these old people are sitting on fucking real estate that's worth, $500,000 or more, and they're paying taxes like it only cost them fucking $50,000.
Right.
It's fucking insane. It's insane.
All
right, buddy. This was a good talk, man. We talked a lot about basic shit that's like, at some point you're just like, am I saying something I already said before? Because it's the same fucking story in Ukraine as it is in Taiwan, as it is.
Why
in,
am I back here?
this is the pattern of American imperialism, and this is how empires decline and collapse.
I mean, the good news is,
What?
well, our catchphrase.
Oh yeah. When liberty dies,
It dies with thunderous applause.
Thanks, man. We'll see you real soon.
Y'all have a good week. Bye-bye.
All right. Peace.